My name is Marshawn Wolley, and I have the privilege of leading a fireside chat with Dr. Dileep Rao. Dr. Dileep Rao was a vice president of financing and business development and a board member at a venture development and finance institution for 23 years, where he financed the growth of hundreds of businesses and real estate projects. Dr. Rao has started 4 businesses, including corporate ventures, and managed 5 turnaround businesses, 4 of which succeeded. And he was chairman and director of emerging ventures and financial institutions. He's advised on building big businesses with finance smart strategies. His clients have included entrepreneurs, governments, including the US government, Fortune 1000 corporations, including Medtronic and General Mills, and financial institutions such as banks and development finance institutions in the United States. Dr. Rao is a clinical professor of entrepreneurship at Florida International University. Previously, he was at the University of Minnesota. He has been awarded numerous awards for teaching at both universities. He's taught at Stanford, Costa Rica, Harvard, in addition to executive MBA programs around the world. He's also a keynote speaker on how finance smart entrepreneurs develop high growth ventures with little or no venture capital. He is an internationally acclaimed author in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial finance blogger for Forbes.com, one of the world's largest online business sites. He has 2 engineering degrees and a doctorate in business administration from the University of Minnesota. We are very pleased to have you with us, sir. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So you have quite the background. Can you talk about how, like, just your path, like how you went from engineering and got into business?
Sure. I got my first job as an engineer. I spent one day in the factory, and then I visited some of the officers who had terrific offices, and they had MBAs, and I said, that's enough of engineering, and I switched to business school.
There you go. That's a good way to discover a knack for business. So you are really a world-class expert on finance. And one of the things I learned in talking to you is there's a difference between like entrepreneurial finance and then like venture finance. And so one of the questions I had for you is you've had the opportunity to interview and analyze 115 unicorn entrepreneurs. What is a key lesson for minority enterprises? And can you also explain what a unicorn entrepreneur is for those who don't know?
Sure. That number actually has increased to 117 since we spoke. I talked to 2 more. Unicorn entrepreneur, as I've defined it, there are 2 kinds, $1 billion and $100 million. These are entrepreneurs who started the business and built it to over 100 million in sales and valuation, and that's the lower level. And the upper level is to $1 billion in sales and valuation. So as you can guess, there aren't that many of them. And I think I've covered the waterfront when I've gone to about $87 billion entrepreneurs. There are 3 key lessons that I found for minority entrepreneurs and all entrepreneurs, but especially minority entrepreneurs. Many entrepreneurs think they need venture capital to grow. You know, the interesting point is that 94% of the $1 billion entrepreneurs took off without venture capital. They found other ways and other strategies and other financing to grow. Many entrepreneurs think they need first mover strategies, and that's why pitch competitions are all the rage. Only 11% of first movers really dominated. Most of the $1 billion entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, they took other people's ideas. I don't want to say stole because that has a bad connotation, but they appropriated them. And then they improved on them. And then they executed better. So the skills and smart strategies are more important than the idea. Somehow entrepreneurship has gone off the track and everybody says idea, idea. Ideas basically are a dime a dozen. Entrepreneurs think they can get VC based on the idea. They don't. Among these unicorn entrepreneurs, only 1% got it because of the idea, the technology, and that person split the gene. So today, if you can cure cancer, or the COVID, yes, you'll get your money for the idea, but otherwise you actually have to launch the venture and take off. So the reality is minority entrepreneurs, like any others, need to prove their potential without venture capital. And then they can decide after they take off whether they need venture capital or not.
That's very insightful information. If you hadn't looked at the data, folks they just wouldn't know that. So what should minority enterprises do immediately to find the right financing?
Well, I like to put them into 3 steps. The first step is get the right skills. You need to know what you need to do. Many people think it's just instinctive. Most of it is not. Sales maybe, but even there, I know many people who've done a fantastic job at selling. But the skills are first, what do you need to know about the technology in the industry you want to get into? So if you're going to get into the web, learn about how to develop your app on the web. Otherwise, if you go to a guy like Mark Zuckerberg, he might appropriate your idea. Second, learn how to sell. See, this is where people who are not born salespeople can do well, because with the internet, even nerds like me can do well by learning how to sell on the internet. And the third is finance. How do you do more with less? That's a fundamental issue about entrepreneurial finance. Venture capital finance is they try to do more with more, but entrepreneurial finance is you try to do more with less. And so you need to know financial strategies, financial techniques, and analysis. And then how do you find the financing? How do you operate it? Now, when you look at the types of financing, this is the second issue. There are different kinds of financing. And everybody says, oh, equity or venture capital. You know, first of all, there at least are 5 kinds. I'll put them into 5 groups. First is, I call it friendly capital. And this is your family, your friends, your angels, crowds, your savings, the government. The US government is very friendly compared to the rest of the world. I've spoken or taught or worked in many countries. This country has more programs for small business. Not all of them work, but they do have them. So can you get friendly capital? The second is strategic capital. Not many people think of this, but this is where you form alliances. This is where you use the business chain. You use your suppliers, you use your customers. You know, this is what Michael Dell did. This is what Wayfair did. The third is internal capital. This is the toughest. And this is where you bootstrap. You know, for some of us who grew up without much money, bootstrapping is not that difficult. But for people who go to Harvard and Stanford, money is showered upon them. They don't have to bootstrap, but the rest of us do. The second is strategic bootstrapping. How do you adjust the price? How do you adjust the speed so that you can grow at the level you want with limited capital? And strategic pivoting. This is like Uber. You know, they started in one direction, switched to another. Bill Gates did the same thing. Sam Walton did the same thing. The fourth kind of capital is cash flow based. This is loans and leases, everybody knows this. And the fifth is institutional venture capital, and they only fund after AHA. So what minority entrepreneurs need to know is how do you find the right financing by stage? And this is the third issue. What are the stages? If you haven't developed your product, you're called the research and development stage. If you have the product, you're at the startup stage. If you have some sales, you're emerging stage. If you're taking off, that's a takeoff stage. At each level, you have different kinds of financing. How do you structure it? What's the right amount? What's the right source? What's the right instrument? It's not just saying, oh, give me money. The third is what's a strategy, which means how do you combine the business and the finance so that you don't screw up? You don't run out of money. And you said, oh, I wish I had 100,000 more. If you're in the middle of the ocean or the desert without capital, you're screwed. So you need to know how to use the financing.
That's so fascinating. I mean, I think most of the time when we're dealing with minority enterprises, we are thinking about banks and how we don't have access to capital for banks. But you just outlined a variety of ways that you can leverage your operation, your supply chain, maybe even friends and family, to get your operation moving. And it sounds like it's contingent upon you might have more success with various kinds of strategies depending on the stage that you're in.
Absolutely.
And so
Because each of these financiers like to finance in certain stages. Now, banks traditionally like to finance after you have cash flow, except if they are given government guarantees or lots of collateral, then they might consider a much earlier stage. So there are nuances in all of these. But in general, yes, you need to worry about the stage you're in and who is right for that stage.
So let's talk, can we talk a little bit more about that? So how can minority enterprises use the right kind of financing? Because that seems to be key for success.
Absolutely. People like Mark Zuckerberg, people like Jan Koum, who built WhatsApp, they had financiers running after them and saying, please, may I fund you? They didn't have to go to any pitch competition to get money. They had actually launched the business. And Jan Koum had about 200 million users. And the VCs were after him. And he got that with 250,000 that his partner raised. So yes, entrepreneurs need to know how to get to that stage. And the first thing is they need to know how to find the right growth opportunity. Just saying, I want to do this is not enough. There are certain patterns that these billion-dollar entrepreneurs used in order to grow. They found the right growth opportunity. And one of the biggest patterns is they got onto an emerging trend or an emerging industry. What does that mean? Think about Bill Gates, got onto PCs. Think about Google, got onto internet. Think about Uber, got onto Internet 2.0. So when the industry is emerging, when the trend is emerging, Chipotle got onto the organic food craze. That's when the best opportunities are. And we need to train minority entrepreneurs to get onto those opportunities and not do the same thing where they are eating each other's bread. The second is they need to find the right strategy. Strategy is not just saying, oh, who can I find? Let me find as many customers as I can. All of these people had laser focus in order to take off. Let me give you a great example. Sam Walton, one of the companies we funded was Walmart. This is when he was still growing in America. He was about 3 or 4 years old. And what he did, he was in business for about 15 years, running small stores in Arkansas. And the big store concept hit the big cities. Kmart and Target started in the big cities. Sam Walton looked at that idea and pivoted. He said, let me get rid of these small Ben Franklin stores. He took the big store idea, put it into small towns. And everybody said he's going to fail because you need a big town to support a big store. And he said, I let people keep thinking that. And I kept telling people how poor I was because I didn't want them to come into small towns. He was a genius. But by going into small towns, he basically dominated the small town market. And Kmart tried to get into small towns much later. One of the stores that we funded actually got a Kmart in 5 years later. He demolished that Kmart store. So he found the right strategy. Once he monopolized small towns, then he came to the big cities. And with that base, he killed Kmart. Target is doing well, but he's killed Kmart. The third issue is you find the right financing by stage to grow with control. We've talked about that, so I'm not going to talk much more. But people like Jeff Bezos, what Jeff Bezos did when he started was he was a genius, and he was in one of quant firms on Wall Street, quit that at 30, and somebody asked him why. He said, when I look back at the age of 80, I want to make sure that I minimize my regret. And if I didn't start a venture today, I can't, at the age of 80, say I want to start a venture then. So he quit, went to Washington. The first money he raised was from his family. He got $300,000 from his parents. And then he got, and that might be more than most of us, my parents couldn't afford to give me $300,000. But you can find other people. And then he went to angels and got another $1 million. Once he took off, then he got one venture capital firm, then he had an IPO. So he found the right financing by stage. Dick Schultz, who started Best Buy, essentially worked for Sony. He was a sales rep for people like Sony and Panasonic. Made $9,000 and saved $9,000. and then used that to start Best Buy. His entire investment in Best Buy was $9,000. All the rest was other people's money. He knew how to do it. And the fourth one, which is the toughest for every entrepreneur, is how do you take off with limited capital? How do you grow more with less? This is where you need skills. You need to have finance skills, you need to have sales skills, you need to have operation skills. And you need to take off with a limited runway. Otherwise, you crash. I've had many entrepreneurs come to me when I was a financier and say, if only I had 200,000 more. Hardly anybody wants to fund you when you're going out of business. That's tough. So we purchased 5 of those companies and turned 4 of them around. And we purchased it for very little money. So the point is, you need to know how to do those 4 strategies. And those are in my, the first 2 are in my last book, which is called Nothing Ventured, Everything Gained. And if you go to dileeprao.com, you can see it. The next book, called, and it's behind me there, the next book called Finance Secrets of Billion-Dollar Entrepreneurs will be coming out in November. And I hope your audience loves that book. And if they want a discount, they can write to me, or maybe I'll talk to Emil.
Dr. Rao, there was a couple of questions. One of them you really already kind of addressed, but one of them I know when we talked, Dr. Rao, was about the issue of racism. Can you just share a few words on that and how you think about overcoming that based on our conversation that we had?
Well, I think, I mean, I've encountered it, but nowhere to the level of my Black brothers and sisters. So I don't want to put myself in the same shoes. But I worked with Native American tribes. I worked with African American CDCs in the Deep South and Native American reservations. So I've seen this firsthand. And one of the biggest issues I've had, and the reason why the federal government, I stopped working for the federal government, is I kept telling them, you need to teach them skills. You need to teach them smart strategies before they screw up. Don't wait for them to screw up. Let's teach them those skills. Because if you look at, I'm writing a bio of Michael Dell. I can send it to your audience if you want. They can write to me. The skills he had were absolutely amazing. This guy knew what he was doing when he started Dell at the age of 19. Those skills can be taught. So we can teach those skills and we can develop them. Without skills, you will waste the capital. In order to make the capital go further, you need skills.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the conversation. This is the first of a series of conversations with Dr. Rao. We very much appreciate the opportunity to learn your expertise, particularly on smart financing. And with that, we'll move forward with the InnoPower.
One last comment, if I may. What Emil is doing is fantastic, but he needs to start to teach skills. Thank you so much.
There we go. There we go. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Rao. We very much appreciate the opportunity to have you with us.
Take care.